of Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I participated in the debate today because of two reasons. One, because I'm concerned about the general approach that this government is taking towards the House of Commons, towards the process of debate and discussion and amendment in a minority House. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. And obviously because of our concern about the substance of the way in which this government is handling, particularly handling criminal justice legislation. On the first point, Mr. Speaker, my colleague from Edmonton St. Albert made much of the fact that this bill had gone through the Senate, which the government now effectively controls, and therefore the House of Commons, which is now receiving the bill, and the government's the one who decided to put it into the Senate, not us. So they decided to put it into the Senate, and miracle of miracles, because they control the makeup of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, they managed to get it through without any changes or any amendments. And then when it comes to the House of Commons, and the House of Commons deals with the legislation, and the House of Commons decides that it should be amended, if that's in fact what the Commons decided, it's what the committee decided, and we'll just see whether or not it is what the House of Commons decides. At that point, the government takes great offense and says, well, you know, if you amend this bill, then that effectively means that we're going to have to go back to the Senate again, and this is their most powerful reason for not providing any amendments. Mr. Speaker, to say that I'm unimpressed with this approach is putting it mildly. The problem we've had with this government in both of its apparitions, the first apparition in 2006 and the second apparition in 2008, is that they have never understood what it means to govern in a minority parliament. Sur cette situation, c'est clair, Monsieur le Président, que
the situation is clear, Mr. Speaker. The government has never accepted the fact that it is a minority and that it has no choice but to accept the fact that there are possibilities that amendments will be made to its legislation if it wants to pass a law on one subject or another. And that is why today I referred to a sickness in this government, a democratic deficit that has been this government's problem since it came to power. And when I see the performance of the ministers responding to questions in this House of Commons, they don't actually give an answer. All they do is attack the person putting the questions. They never actually deal with the substance of the question. All they do is attack ceaselessly. It has nothing to do with democracy. And I have been in public life for over 30 years, and I can tell you that I have never seen such a performance on the part of a government that is supposed to support the notion of democracy.
Such a performance as I've seen from this government since my election here in this place in 2008. Never answer a question of substance, never deal with an issue of substance. The only method that they know how to deal with any question is to attack the character, attack the personality, attack something else, attack history, attack some other point. Well, Mr. Speaker, now they turn around and say, oh my gosh, we have an amendment here, and we're not prepared to deal with the amendments to this legislation. Well, I have news for this government. There will be lots of amendments to a legislation that they propose. There will be lots of discussions, and there may from time to time even be defeats if they persist in this approach of saying it's my way or the highway. It is not the way to conduct the public affairs of a country. It's not the way to conduct the public affairs of a province. And it's not a way to conduct the public business of Canada. And as we see it day by day, the corrosive effect of the attitude which this government continues to display, of the way in which it continues to present itself to this House and to the people of Canada, it increasingly attacks the very notion of democracy. I find it so ironic that it's the Reform Party, Mr. Speaker, that came to this House with all of its ideas about how they were going to restore democracy. This government has shown a systematic contempt for parliamentary democracy. They know nothing of respect for the parliamentary process. They complain about amendments being brought forward by the opposition. Of course there will be amendments. It's our right and it's our responsibility to bring forward amendments. And for this government to say, we will not deal with them, we will not treat with them, we will not ever compromise, we will not negotiate, we will not make any arrangements to allow legislation to go through, and that's the way we're going to govern, well, that's tough for them, Mr. Speaker, because if that's the way they're going to govern, then we have no option, Mr. Speaker, but to say we will stand in our places and fight and fight and fight again, because this is an approach to democracy which simply cannot be allowed to stand. Mr. Speaker, the government claims that they're concerned about the economy. The government says to us, member from Peterborough was up on his feet yesterday saying to us, why would you bring up issues of the Charter when you should be worrying about jobs? Well, I would say to the member for Peterborough, show me the legislation you're bringing forward that deals with jobs. Every single item you're bringing forward, you're going to make the criminal code, it's going to be bigger than the Encyclopedia Britannica if you guys are allowed to get away with this.
Order. I just do have to take this opportunity to remind the member for Toronto Centre that he does have to address his comments to the chair and not directly at other colleagues.
I've only been here for 30 years. I can't get used to not using the phrase you guys. I apologize. But I can only say, Mr. Speaker, that the approach to criminal justice that's being taken by this government is an approach that is not going to affect, it's not going to reduce, it's not going to reduce the level of crime one iota. Every jurisdiction in the United States which has attempted the approach which is being now taken on by the Government of Canada, every jurisdiction is coming back to us and saying, please don't do what we did. Do not do what we did. We have British politicians coming to us, Mr. Speaker, and saying emphatically to us, our prisons are overflowing. We did not realize what the impact of some of our legislation was going to be. How have you managed to keep things under control? And I look at them and I say, well, we did manage for a considerable period of time with a crime rate that's been going down and not going up, with a protection of the public that's been going up and not going down. And the only message this government over here knows is fear. Fear, fear, and fear again, which has nothing to do with the reality on the ground and with the need to prevent. Do they have a crime prevention strategy? No. Are they encouraging those communities that want to prevent crime? No. Are they working with the provinces to make sure that we deal with gangs in schools and with violence on our streets? No, they're not. Their only answer is lock them up, throw away the key, let's be done with it, minimum sentences, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's the only approach this government knows, Mr. Speaker. It's not an approach worthy of the name. It does not pass muster when it comes to dealing with the challenges and problems that we have as a country, and it does not deal effectively with the problem that we have, which is, yes, do we have a problem of crime? Every country has a problem of crime. A problem of crime that comes out of poverty, a problem of crime that comes out of insecurity, a problem of crime that comes out of addiction, a problem of crime that comes out of drug dependence, a problem of crime that comes out of alcohol dependence, a problem of crime that comes out of hopelessness and no opportunity. This government doesn't get that. This government's answer to those people is to say, we're simply going to lock you up and we're going to throw away the key. So I want to say, Mr. Speaker, yes, we're going to be moving amendments to this particular bill. We're going to be hoping that our colleagues in the opposition and whoever has the will to stand up on the other side will stand up and do with it. And if the government says, well, this is very inconvenient of us because we got this bill crystal clear through with no amendments and no discussion through the Senate, and there was no problem, well, as we say in French, Mr. Speaker, tant pis, too bad. Ça, c'est le problème pour le gouvernement.
That's the government's problem. It's not our problem, Mr. Speaker. The other obligation of the opposition is to ask questions, to make changes, amendments, to listen to witnesses before the committee, and to continue with a positive approach, a responsible approach that will deal with the real crime problems instead of everything that the government's coming forward with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Peterborough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think he ended this exactly where I wanted to go with his speech, which I consider to be most unfortunate, because the message that the Liberal Party and the coalition members are sending to people in our communities, the message they're sending to victims, the message that they're sending to people that are advocating for justice measures that will protect society is too bad. Too bad. They're going to be irresponsible when it comes to justice. They'd rather play politics with the issues than actually stand up for safe streets and communities. The message from the member for Toronto Centre is quite simple to the people in my community and the people of communities right across this country that want real justice measures in place. His message, too bad, we're irresponsible. How does he respond to that?
The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
I respond to it by saying the member is full of hot air, Mr. Speaker. And I respond to him very directly by saying that what we've said is very clear. If we believe for 1 second, that the whole panoply of crime measures that are being brought forward by this government actually address the issue of crime, actually address the question of safety on our streets, actually looked at the problems that people are facing in our communities, we will respond, and we will respond in an effective manner. But what we have to say, Mr. Speaker, is when we're told, as we were told by the member of Edmonton St. Albert, sorry, you shouldn't be bringing forward any amendments because it's very inconvenient for the government. We might have to go back to the Senate again. I said, no, nothing is being delayed. The issues are being debated. Issues are being discussed. And the problem with the reason that we have an issue in this House, Mr. Speaker, is for the simple reason that this government will not accept amendments. There hasn't been an amendment proposed that they've ever accepted.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the member whether he thinks this government is guilty of a little bit of false advertising here, because in fact the provisions under their bill, under the Faint Hope Clause bill, won't take effect for 15 years. So they'll be coming into the election in a few months proclaiming that they've got tough on crime and they've eliminated the Faint Hope Clause, and the people are going to be very disappointed when they find out it's going to be 15 years before any part of this act takes effect. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, month by month, every month, Conservatives are putting pension checks in envelopes and licking stamps and sending pension checks to Clifford Olson, a process that started under Conservative government of Joe Clark in 1976. And they've yet to explain why they're still doing it, or, in fact, why they started mailing those checks in the first place.
The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
Well, I think the member's right. I mean, I think when you look at this legislation, the particular bill that's being proposed by the government they want us to deal with today, the government is saying to us, look, you've got to get this through right away. It's urgent that we get this bill through. It's absolutely vital that we get this. We are going to be making the streets safer. Mr. Speaker, this legislation will have no impact until 2025 or 2026. It's not urgent legislation. It's important to get it right. It's important to make sure that the people who are the victims of violent crime are given full information, which is what one of the amendments that's in this legislation is all about. So I don't know why we wouldn't take that approach, Mr. Speaker.
I can take a very brief question or comment. The honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree entirely with the honourable member's speech, particularly with respect to the approach of the government to lock them up, throw away the key, and maybe someday or another they might get out. The problem with that approach is that it costs a fortune and it doesn't work. And so I'd be interested in the honourable member's comments on the enormous amount of money that the Truth in Sentencing bill is going to cost the Canadian taxpayer, and does he actually think that locking people away for a longer and longer and longer periods of time at great expense to the taxpayer actually will do anything to reduce the crime rate?
The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
I think we're going to dramatically, under the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, we're going to dramatically increase the rate of incarceration among the Aboriginal population, rate of incarceration among many minorities across the country. We're going to put a huge burden on the provinces because most of the minimum sentencing requirements are affecting the provinces and not going to be affecting the federal government at all. They're going to have a dramatic impact on that, and they're not going to deal with the root problem, which is what I'm trying to say. Tough on crime? Absolutely. Tough on the causes of crime. Where is the tough on the causes of crime? I don't see the national addiction programs. I don't see the national mental health programs. I don't see the national programs dealing with the need for us to work very closely with the provinces on breaking up gangs. I don't see any of this. What we see is a simplistic ideological approach to this question, Mr. Speaker, which will not do what the government says it wants to do.
Reprise du débat.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Marcorel-Fortin.